Ongoing strategy and business plan go together. You don't make money, you don't get successful by just falling into it. Or if you do, you don't stay there, okay? So you need to have that focus on what's going on.
In terms of business, and if you've started your business, what did you find was the most difficult piece in terms of finding the difference between success and overcoming the challenges and barriers?
I started my business, Cynthia and I started our consulting firm together. The biggest issue for us was, one, what is our sweet spot? You get out there, you hang your shingle out, and you want to do anything. People come to your door, you're willing to whatever. We really had to focus in what do we do well, and what is our product or service we're selling. That was essential for us to get that out there. And the second thing is, we were selling us, we were selling knowledge. And so we had to make sure we invested in ourselves as a business to make sure we were uppermost in what was going on and what product or service we brought to our client base. So the investment in yourself to make sure what you bring is real. And the second one is a focus on what you're doing. And the third is we had to realize when people said no, they meant no, not now. They didn't mean no, never when we're selling our product service. They meant no, not now. So those are some of the challenges, and that's how we sort of look beyond there to how we're going to grow our business and be successful.
I would echo those words as well. And what I found my sweet spot was Aboriginal business, and combine that with being a lawyer and being able to see both sides, i.e. Walking the corporate non-native world and also working within our communities. And a lot of it in the early days when I did it was I was very disheartened in the sense, something that Don Bernstick touched upon. I get hired by a lot of major corporations in the world. I find that non-Aboriginal communities and companies hire me, but then when I have this, I believe, very unique product to offer my own community, it's kind of disheartening because you're trying to say, there it is, this is what I can do. And it's now starting to turn around in a big way, and people are more First Nations and more Indigenous tribes in Canada and in the United States are coming my way. But that's sort of one of the frustrations I saw in the beginning days. But you have to stick with it, and eventually it'll all come together. But one thing too that is very important is to make sure you get a mentor that can help you understand what is taking place. Why is this working here but it's not working here? Because you're getting lost in the emotion of what's hitting you on real-time basis. Someone else that can step back a bit and say, well, you got to think about this, you got to think about that, and you got to go here, you don't go here, you got to do this, you don't do that.
In terms of contracting and opportunities in the industry and government side of things, what do you feel companies, what do you look for?
Well, nowadays everything's competitive. Everybody's regulated. The thing I look for is competition. Do they have a product, like what you mentioned, that we could use and is competitive? They might not be competitive today, but what you do is you make sure that you give them feedback so they're competitive tomorrow. And I mean, you know, I'm in procurement. One of the things that I strive to do is tell the people that didn't win the competition why. And you know, in procurement, that's very difficult because people kind of wonder. But I think that's very important to go away and realize what you have to do better. So that's one of the challenges. But what I look for is good competition, transparency.
In terms of joint ventures and partnerships, why do you feel that that's a key thing in terms of creating capacity?
For me, it was a 2-year process trying to convince not only 13 bands, you know, and anyone, there are many people in this room and at this table that will tell you, Bernd just kind of mentioned it a bit, that, you know, bands have a difficulty when it comes to working with each other, when it comes down to actual business. It's one thing for bands to work together for policy or for common cause, and that's always easy, sometimes easy. But when you put money into the mix, it becomes a very different circumstance. And suddenly, like I think Evo mentioned today, like all the jealousies come out, and people want to be sort of the big dog, you know. And so we had spent the better part of 2 years really kind of massaging these with these bands and councils that say, you know, we really think this is a great idea, you know, to really get into, you know, both a business venture that really speaks to who we are as Mi'kmaq, and that's to kind of build something that does something positive for the planet, and then say to them, you know, for me the big moment for me was we were kind of all into it, and we had basically all of the equity there. We had the financing basically done. We had all the elements there, and the last thing was to then put this into an actual company, actual joint venture company, to Robert's question. And my biggest fear was this is all going to kind of fall apart when we asked the question, how do we do the actual shares for this company? And I was stunned because they said it'll be equal. You got these large bands and these small bands, and they all said we're fine with it, with everything being equal. The first time that I can ever think of where we did something where there was money on the table, and everyone said the kind of size of our band does not matter. It's the fact that we spent 2 years doing this together from the very beginning to the very end. And to me, it was that process that really made this thing work. And so, to answer your question, Laura, in a very long way, it was, I think, spending time and getting everyone to really appreciate the fact that everyone's efforts meant something, and it didn't matter if you were from like a small band or a large band. Your efforts mattered, and so at the very critical moment when we're there to really talk about sharing all this wealth, they said it'll be equal.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Back to Cassandra. In terms of working with larger companies, medium to large size companies, what is the critical factor when you see success? And you've worked with probably quite a few different companies. What do they have in terms of the success factor?
Probably one, strong business plan. Ongoing strategy and business plan go together. You don't make money, you don't get successful by just falling into it. Or if you do, you don't stay there, okay? So you need to have that focus on what's going on. The second one is, at some point in time, you might need an influx of capital or an influx of equity coming into your company, because you cannot grow without doing that. You'll stay at the medium size, and you'll hit those parameters that don't allow you to go farther. You need to either get money and get equity in that allow you to get larger and bigger with that. The other thing, I'll go back on something Bernd said earlier. You might not know everything, and as you get bigger, the bigger guys reach out to others for expertise. Never stop from doing that, because your medium-sized guys reach out to larger, and even some of the guys we consider large, they're in touch with larger people, larger organizations. So there is it's necessary to make sure your strategy is working. You revisit it on an ongoing basis. If there's a need for an equity, reach out for that, as well as find strategic advice or advisory services help you grow your business. This is what the medium to large-sized guys do. And we at the small level think, oh, we don't need all that. We know what we're doing. You have to realize the winners are doing that. Why aren't you doing that?
Thank you. Bernd, in terms of Aboriginal inclusion strategies and I guess the importance of working together as Aboriginal businesses and associations, the thought about creating an Aboriginal chamber, what do you think about that as a best practice?
Yeah, I see that would be a very good opportunity. There's always safety in numbers. If one of the herd gets dragged down by a hungry lion, the others are still going. And in some cases, the herd can attack the lion and stops the feast, I guess, on that unfortunate animal that's going down. But it goes back to saying that we, as a collective, will look out for each other and help each other out. The idea of a good business chamber is not new. So there's lots of places we can go to learn best practices of how they're set up, and they don't necessarily have to follow how, say, the Toronto Chamber of Commerce works, or the Halifax Chamber, or the Vancouver. There's all kinds of other models out there, and they can be adapted according to what is best for a group, say like we are here in the room, to figure out how to do it. But then what happens then is there's numbers, and when you're going after something, you're almost going, in a way, as a large entity after a large goal. This morning I talked about the shipyard procurement. If you go as a chamber, they more than likely will do business with you as a chamber, because they see that there's not just Bernd Christmas and his little law group, Jason Gugu and his geomatics. It's a combination. They see a whole bunch of services and offerings they can get from one entity, and that could only lead to a huge contract, which ultimately would be shared amongst us all. Well, right now, since we don't have one, all we can do is go up and move onward. I think if you look at other places where, if you want to look at pitfalls, I guess it's like any other organization. You don't want someone to hijack it. Like you just don't want, if you nominate me as the president, you don't want me to get all the business. You want to make sure that that individual is, that president or CEO or whatever the title is of the organization, is getting opportunities for everyone. And so you don't get that hijacking of the organization. So that I could see as a potential pitfall, because naturally an Irving contact or procurement officer will want to go to the person that's representing the organization, and naturally it'd be the so-called president or CEO or executive director, and then that person gets the dialogue going. So you got to watch that. But that all can be worked out, because you hire or you nominate someone to volunteer that position that is well respected and will not fall into that trap. And then you switch it around every couple of years or so. That's one pitfall I can see.
I'm kind of a half full kind of guy, but the only pitfall that I could see if you have a chamber is having somebody else misrepresenting and taking and running with their ideas. But like you say, by switching the leadership, I think it would be great. I'm on the other side of the counter. I see a chamber as a much greater resource. Like, I might, engage that person. Oh, that's a lead for the next. And that's how networking works. Not one part of the organization can represent everything. And that's why, you network with a large chamber, is because you want to have the ability to go out and reach a greater audience. So that's kind of my take. I can't see too many pitfalls coming.
The only thing, if I can just say,
Yep.
The only thing with chambers, I sat on the APCC board, the Atlantic Provinces Chamber of Commerce board, is one of the problems they had is there were too many chambers, and they were falling over everybody. So it has to be clear sort of what the outcome or what you're looking for and what you're trying to do. And the other thing, as business people, you want the strength in building up from an Aboriginal perspective, but at some point you want to join the bigger perspective. You want to become mainstream. So you don't want to offside yourself too much that you're now in competition, that bodies are going there and not there. At some point there has to be some connection, because at the end of the day we're all in it for how do we grow businesses? How do they know where you are, and how do you be able to do that? And so you want to make sure it's not completely like this, that there's some linkage that affords you to take the bets from them and them to use the sort of strengths on this side, okay?
Just quickly too, and maybe I can add to that. We did have something like that back in, what was it, 2000, 2001, I think it was?
1997.
97. Was that wow.
Yeah, 98.
98. We had this, we had a kind of collection of about 45 companies back when Rob and I worked with ExxonMobil. And it was the Aboriginal Alliance of Companies, and it was put together to essentially try to, like what Bernd was saying, try to, to have a pack, and basically to have everyone move in one kind of direction. And we had to sort of, I think, two things that can really be a real threat to that. One is, and this was mentioned this afternoon by Mr. Joe. He said that that politics and business don't mix. It's like mixing oil and water. And there has to be a very clear, defined line between where the kind of political powers can really help that thing grow, but that line cannot be crossed when it can be sort of done in a very negative way, and vice versa. That association has to really understand, and I'll say this the best way I can, what their sort of place is. And by that I mean that they have to recognize that there is a process that can be very helpful for them, that can be really done in the most effective and most powerful way by some leadership. And so I think if you can get that balance right, where you have the kind of association working its own magic, if you will, and making contacts and creating contracts for themselves, and using the other side of that ledger, that kind of political power in its most positive way, that's where I think it really makes it'll be the most effective. The threat that we had to ours, Robert, as I recall, was, and it was a threat that we never saw even actually coming, was when the whole intention of this whole alliance was to create, again, the capacities and contracts within the offshore oil and gas sector. But and that's a long process. I mean, that sector demands a lot of sort of like certifications and trainings and all these things that we never actually had that kind of stuff, and not many local firms here had that kind of thing either. But the threat was, and maybe it was also a benefit, I'm not sure, depending on where you were, was in fact there was around when the alliance was getting its sort of strongest. The Marshall Plan came out. Marshall Plan was 1945.
Agreement.
The Marshall Fishery thing came out, and I think that our owners in that alliance, and for all the best reasons, I think, saw that they can either stay with our alliance, work hard, maybe get something from this sector, and that might be small, or kind of break it up and go after the fishing sector, which seemed to be at that time much more sort of positive for them. And so some of those threats came to us, and that's what made it kind of collapse at the end of the day.
Okay, any other questions? We got a question.
I just have one question. If there's one book out there that you'd recommend, what would it be?
I hate to say this one. I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to hate myself because I think the author is a bit of an idiot. But Donald Trump wrote a book back in I think it was back in the 90s, The Art of the Deal. And I know that people have their own opinions about Trump and his politics, and they can be very extreme. But when it comes down to business, there was a passage in there that is really, really, really true for I think anyone who wants to get into business. And he said that there are like three things that you must have, and you can't have two, you can't have one, you must have three of them. The first one is passion. You have to really love what you're doing, because he said the passion will be the one that will keep you going when you're having your most darkest days. There's not a person in this room that doesn't have a business that wouldn't tell you that they've had some very dark days, working just as hard and not getting paid for that. The second thing he said was that you have to understand what you do backwards and forwards. Understand everything of it, because there are so many moving parts in your business, and each moving part could have a threat there. So know that backwards and forwards. And the third part, Bernd mentioned this, was people. Never assume that you know everything. Have the best people around you, and so that and he said make sure that people and don't be afraid to have them challenge you and say that you're wrong, because you probably are wrong. And so basically passion, it's know your business and have the best people around you. But I don't like Donald Trump so much.
I apologize. I do not have one book. I'm a voracious reader. I read everything. And so therefore, whether it's Harvard Business Review, any business book out there, there's always a nugget that I find I can utilize. And whether it's all about strategy planning, it's all about implementation, or if you go into any of the biographies and what some of the successful guys have done, there's always a trinket or a nugget from there that I can utilize. And so I will tell you, read whatever you can get your hands on.
As far as my, like you say, the nuggets out there, a lot of the authors are, they'll tell how I did it, and But if you can capture one thing from every author and one trait, that's what you want to take away. You don't want to repeat what somebody else has done, because likely it's not going to happen. But if you grab that one thing or one trait, even from coworkers or whoever, but is just take it from there. I know what my mom would say. She'd say, read the Bible. But
all our mothers would say that. Yeah.
But again, take that one trait away.
For me, I think a really good book. It's an old book. It was written thousands of years ago. It's called The Art of War, and it's very, very interesting from a business perspective, because it talks about honor, integrity. As a sole practitioner or a sole entrepreneur, your word is your honor, your credibility. You have to say and do what you say you're going to do, and it also the book touches upon knowing your enemy, i.e., know your business. But I think the most part of it, the best part of it all, is the idea of integrity and honor, and working within that. And if you, I think if you follow that, you should do fairly well. So that's the book I would recommend, Art of War.
There's so many different questions I'd like to ask, but one, I'd like to get a comment from each one of you regarding how this kind of event might have helped you 10 years ago, and specifically regarding networking, and how has that impacted your life and your businesses in the last 10 years?
First of all, if this had been 10 years ago, we were struggling with trying to find our voice, our sort of get our business concentrated. So having minds in the room that you can actually bounce ideas up would have taken us much farther. It took us a while. Like, we came across Robert and Eric. I can't even remember how we came across each other. And we spent many hours contemplating how we were going to build this, how we were going to get some budding entrepreneurs together, what we're going to do with the corporate environment. That idea by itself, just the ability for us to interact and connect with each other, helped us sort of form our plan on what we needed to go forward with. So if you take nothing away from this, take away at least 2 or 3 business cards or connections that you can maintain that contact, because this type of forum, this works well on an introductory level, but it also works well as you grow your business, because you come with different stories, different interactions that allow people to either learn from you or you to learn from others.
I can't repeat enough of that. Just the networking, you're going to get out there and you're going to make connections, whether it's this weekend or, make as much communications as you can out there, because these are the type of relationships that'll carry you forward. I'm on the other side of the table, and I can't encourage that enough. So that's my input.
Yeah, again, echoing the same, and I would just add that it probably helps to see others that are going through the same struggles, and hearing some of the stories that you're dealing with. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the issue would have been, well, we don't really have role models to follow. There are lots of role models out there, and there are a lot of folks that can, they're a phone call away, actually an email away, that you can just quickly ask a quick question, not bugging them whatsoever, just ask a quick question. What do you think of this? Boom, you're on your way. You saved yourself a visit to your lawyer, your accountant. Well, not lawyer, but you know what I mean. So I think the knowing that we're part of the herd, as I used already, and those lions that are going to attack us, whether it's the bad bankers that are trying to foreclose on your mortgage on your house and that get that loan back, there's others out there that can give you some ideas of how to maybe get around that and help you out a bit, and maybe even lend you a few bucks if you have to, if in that kind of crisis. Eric?
Okay, I'm still married, thankfully. I think for me, I think the difference today for me was that, and just only again from my experiences over the last couple of years working with these bands, is that I think 10 years ago, we would have been talking about funding, ANSI funding or COA funding, and these things are always still very, very important. What I've learned since then is that when you have your own equity and when you get to play with let's say finance, it's a very different animal that you're actually playing with. It changes the way that you think about what you're actually doing. When you get ANSI funding, which is always great, I know there is ANSI folks here that I very much appreciate, but the funding itself it doesn't come with all the sort of different strings that, again, someone that's in finance wants. ANSI will simply say, just make sure that you guys spend it within the fiscal year, give us your extra reports, and we're done. And that's fine. But in my experience with these two wind ventures, it's been like we're now in the room with these huge companies, and it isn't banks. It's either pension companies or life cos. They have a very different approach to these things, and so we are now learning how these things actually work, and it's really, really amazing. And just seeing how these sort of mindsets change within our own group, because now we're getting equity and we're getting financing, and we're not using ANSI funds for these ventures. So, yeah.
All right, thank you, everybody. So with that, I just wanted to thank our panels, and Bernd, Hugh, Cassandra, Eric. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.